There's something people often misunderstand about change. From the outside, it can look sudden. A relationship ends, someone leaves a job, a person walks away from something they've been a part of for years. And the people watching, they say the same thing. I didn't see that coming. But for most departures, they don't begin when someone leaves. They begin much earlier, quietly, inside, long before anyone else can see them. Because before someone leaves physically, they usually begin growing internally. And it rarely starts with a decision. It starts with a feeling. A quiet awareness that something isn't sitting the way it once did. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle shift. Conversations feel different. Situations that once felt normal begin to feel heavy. You notice yourself becoming quieter in places where you once felt open. Or you notice how much energy it takes just to keep things the way they were. And at first, you may not even trust that feeling. You just question it. Like, am I overreacting? Am I asking for too much? Why does this bother me now when it didn't before? And for a while, many people try to explain it away. They tell themselves they're just tired. I'm just stressed. I'm just going through a phase. Because recognizing that something truly isn't working can feel like standing at the edge of something large. And most people aren't ready to stand there yet. So the mind negotiates. It adjusts. It explains. It compromises. It hopes that maybe the feeling will pass. But when the growth is truly happening, the awareness does not disappear. It actually deepens. Once awareness arrives, questioning usually follows. And that questioning can take many forms. Sometimes it turns inward. Am I the problem here? Is this something that I need to work on within myself? Sometimes it turns toward the life that you're living. Is this actually what I want? Did I choose this? Or did I simply grow into it without noticing? And sometimes the questions becomes more honest, more uncomfortable. What if this isn't right for me anymore? What if the person that I was when I entered into this situation isn't the person that I am right now? And those questions, they rarely arrive all at once. They circle, returning again and again. Sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly. And they most always come with doubt. Because when something has been a part of your life for a long time, it becomes familiar. Even when it no longer feels aligned. Even when it comes or costs more than it returns. So you stay a little longer. You try a little harder. You give it one more chance to feel like it used to. But when growth is real, trying harder doesn't quiet the awareness. It clarifies it. You begin noticing things you once overlooked. Patterns you once excused. Ways that you have been shrinking or accommodating or carrying more than your share. And you realize that you've been doing that for a while. And it's not because you're weak. It's because you were trying. Because you wanted it to work. And somewhere in that recognition, something begins to shift. Not loudly. Not all at once. Your tolerance changes. Your sense of what you're willing to accept moves. Your understanding of yourself becomes a little clearer. And a different question begins to rise to the surface. Not just what is wrong, but what do I actually want? And that question can be surprisingly difficult to answer. Because many people reach this point realizing they've spent years adjusting themselves to circumstances, adjusting without ever fully asking what kind of life they truly want to live. So there's a period of quiet reckoning. That reckoning where someone begins to look honestly at their life, at their relationships, at the patterns they've been living inside. And that honesty can be madly uncomfortable. Because once you see something clearly, it becomes very hard to pretend you didn't see it. And this is where growth is actually happening, even if nothing on the outside has changed yet. Growth changes something fundamental about you. It changes how you interpret what you experience. It changes what you can tolerate. It changes what you recognize as healthy. And slowly, the life you've been living, it begins to feel smaller. It feels smaller than the person that you are becoming. And by the time someone actually leaves a situation, they have usually already outgrown it. The leaving is not the beginning of the change. It's the final expression of a shift that began long before. A shift in awareness, in honesty, in clarity. And eventually there becomes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when someone realizes that the life they are living, it no longer matches the person they have become. And they find themselves standing in that realization, not pushing past it, not explaining it away, just standing there, knowing. And when that knowing becomes clear enough, the decision that once felt impossible begins to feel inevitable. Not easy, but clear. Because by that point, the growth has already happened. The leaving is simply the moment when the outside world catches up to the inside one. So sit with yourself there and continue traveling. If this feeling is where you are right now, the next step isn't fixing your life. It's understanding where you are. And that's where we begin.